This week on BadgerPod NerdCast, the Badgers discuss Big Bang Theory, Doctor Who, and Watchmen. Be sure to tune in. Rated PG-13.
Hello and welcome to BadgerPod NerdCast. Today we've got a lot of interesting topics, and we got our special guest here from the Fine Young Capitalist. How are you, Matt?
Pretty good. Nice to be here.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt? Just
Sure.
For everybody who doesn't know the whole...
Just basic introduction.
Yeah, okay. So hi, I'm Matt. I'm from the Fine Young Capitalists. We're this group that we basically get groups that don't normally make things to make things. Currently, we're working on a women's in video game production where we basically said any woman can come up with an idea for a video game. We get them to work with professional concept artists to visualize their idea. Those ideas are now online, so you can vote on the best one. And if we meet our crowdsourcing goals, we'll work with that woman to make her game, and then we'll give the profits to charity. We're also doing a production to get more representation in graphic novels and science fiction. So it's anybody who self-identifies as black can come up with a character for a graphic novel in the setting that we've done up. And we'll work with them to take the top 5 best characters and to make a graphic novel about that. Again, the profits will be donated to charity.
All right,
Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, it sounds great. We have a Yule Tolbert. Tolbert is a cartoonist who works with us, and he might be interested in hitting you up on that because he has his own personal project. Just a little bit more detail on that particular contest. Do you have to use your setting, or?
It was he should just talk to us, period, because inevitably speaking, we like getting money from people and like having their productions happen. But for this one, it's just that we did it's a really low barrier to entry. The setting's done up. It's a superhero setting. It's got a full description of it, and then you can just write a character for that setting. We haven't even given much of a it's going to be an ensemble cast, but we're going to work with the people who give the ideas to actually make a narrative arc and everything.
Okay,
cool.
It's kind of informational writing, as we call it.
Oh, I see.
We got
Well,
some other
yeah,
folks in here.
definitely.
We've got Dr. Randomer Cam.
Hello.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Mike.
Evil Panda.
I pretend to be a cartoon panda, and I confuse people online. I'm pretty sure I'm doing it right now.
Yes, and I'm sure that the awkwardness quotient has just increased markedly, but also the what the fuck quotient. But that's why we love you, Mike.
That's not my real voice, everyone. Ha, it's a head fake. Oh.
Yeah.
We've also got Sage Gerard. Hey, Sage.
What?
Tell us
What
what
did you just?
you're doing.
Whoa! What the hell just, Sage? What the hell did you just rapidly eject out of your out of your mouth?
I just said what? How y'all doing? Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Well, you're one of the hosts, so we sort of have to have you.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But Sage, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? What do you do? And I know you have a big project, which is Kennesaw State University Men, right?
Yeah. Basically, I'm a men's rights activist that works largely on colleges. Kennesaw State University is where I go to school, and it's where I'm trying to basically grow a flower in concrete by bringing men's rights as an institution to university campuses. And so far, it's been successful, and I know this because a lot of people in staff are really, really, really upset with me. And I think this only happens when you're doing something that actually gets results. And so far, we're moving toward Homeless Awareness Week in October, where we're going to do a canned food drive or something along those lines by collaborating with the Adult Learner Center. And so bringing awareness to the homeless, making sure that some of them get fed, those that come to the campus. And we have a conference coming up on November 1st. People can RSVP for free and come down, no questions asked. And on top of that, basically, we've just been growing, right? We've got media attention from Creative Loafing Atlanta. We've got the Sentinel and the Talon, 2 publications on KSU itself. Also got contacted from a freelance writer for the New Republic and the Los Angeles Times and PJ Media and all sorts of other places. Have just been kind of following KSUM's development. And we now have 12 members and over 50 people overall who are signed up for updates that are all KSU students. And basically now we're just kind of, we are men's rights in school and it's working. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. There's more to it, but that's like the big part of my life right now.
Okay, and Rachel, I know it's hard to introduce yourself, so I'll introduce you. If you return the favor, tell us about yourself, Rachel.
Well, I'm the host of this show some of the time, and the host of Honey Badger Radio, and I also blog extensively on Tumblr. I've camped out over there and made it my home.
Like sort of like Sage, you're trying to grow a flower in concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you guys want to hear some things about atheism or men's rights or really just different little bits of nerdity thrown in, come on over to my blog at naughtynerdist.tumblr.com.
Yeah. Okay, return the favor, Rachel. Come on.
Allison Tiemann is over here in the house. Tell us about yourself, Allison.
Well, actually, whoops. I think, can you guys hear me? Because I think I just had a massive mic failure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good.
We can hear you.
No, it's not massive then. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. Well, I'm one of the three people, Hannah Wallen, Karen Strawn, who sort of created Honey Badger Radio initially. And that's me. And I'm currently doing a personal project, a web comic, a science fiction web comic called Xenospora. It's at xenospora.com. That is my baby. So that's...
And I helped.
Yes, and Rachel did the flats. And Mike did beta reading, and so did Sage. And I think James did too, but we don't talk about James. Anyway, so that's me. And so let's get started. And why don't we pull in Mike? Mike, are you ready? Are you ready, Mike? Mike.
We're doing the Big Bang Theory, are we?
Yes, we're doing the Big Bang Theory.
Yes, we are.
Go for it. Do it.
Are you a nerd? Do you fall into that loose category of people who are passionate about miscellaneous subjects? Then you know by now that anyone can be a nerd. You can be a sports nerd, you can be a music nerd, you can be a gun nerd, you can even be a food nerd. But there is one subject that will never make you a nerd, no matter how obsessed you get about it. And that is, of course, sex. So when CBS's The Big Bang Theory came along, we thought, hooray, a show about nerds, finally. Some male sitcom characters whose lives don't revolve around sex. Well, there's Howard, the sleazy nerd who hits on every female extra who walks into the midground. There's Rajesh, the super shy nerd who can't speak to, or in the presence of, any attractive women without being drunk. A quirk they really didn't think through before writing 7 seasons of character interactions. And, of course, there's Leonard, the whiny nerd, played by the dude from Roseanne, who's been in love with Penny, the every-woman narrative matriarch, only main character who isn't a nerd, actual girl next door, since the first episode. That seems to be the original vehicle of the show. Even Sheldon, the camp nerd, the androgynous hardline Dirac model nerd, who eventually took over the show's proverbial vehicle, even he could only last a few seasons before they brought in Blossom, and they've been trying very slowly to fuck each other ever since. There are some occasionally unexpected bits of well-crafted nerd humor in The Big Bang Theory. Some of its characters are scientists, and some of its writers are scientists. There is a skinny vein of potential to be a worthwhile show, but it's very easy to miss it when it all gets funneled through the cheesy sitcom acting and the cute little puppet people doing it, the superficial characters they play, and the ludicrous and incessant hollering of the proto-marsupial studio audience. What you get is a few tiny scraps of meat and a huge bowl of sugar. Again, no one is in any position to tell you what a real nerd is. But how many millions of hipsters and trendies have to leave with the impression that a real nerd is a good-looking mangina with a laptop before it becomes something that most nerds can agree is a travesty? A left-wing Hollywood bastardization of nerds and everything they stand for? Perhaps. The representation of female nerds also leaves rather a lot to be desired, by the way. As I said, Penny is the baseline avatar from start to finish. She's always there to remind us that these people aren't normal, that people who understand science aren't normal, and hot, blonde, stupid girls are. So I personally am not about to tell you that the women ruined it, that introducing another main female character or two sent this show in a sudden gynocentric direction. This show is, and always was, a gaping hole pinned open by 4 different kinds of omega male waiting to be filled with pussy. You're right, that doesn't work. If you thought this show was going to break the Prince Charming mold, the Disney model, where the criteria for being an accomplished individual is being rich, handsome, and famous and getting the girl as a result, think very much again. As far as the majority of the Big Bang Theory's audience is concerned, a nerd is someone who is rich, handsome, famous, and getting the girl as a result, and has hundreds of delirious studio audience jungle birds caterwauling for their every sneeze. 10 years ago, nerd used to describe an awkward, flabby, computer-bound social reject with a neckbeard. I wonder what happened to that little trope.
Wow.
Yeah, don't hold back there, Mike.
Tell us how you really feel, Mike.
Would anyone else like to say a word or two about the Big Bang Theory?
Oh gosh, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen as much about the show as I think I would. I don't know. I think I remember watching it, and it was it was sitcom-y, and I was just sort of, I didn't really feel all that interested in it. I mean, the start. I remember the beginning. The description about it had me really interested. And then I think I might have watched 1 or 2 episodes, and I said, and I just never picked it up again. And I really think it is because it's very one-dimensional, I think, for me. It doesn't really go very far. It's sort of... I mean, there are these cute little jokes everywhere, every now and then, but it's just kind of lost.
Well, it's a sitcom, it's hard to expect it to...
It's really important to do this thing in context. So, like, this is another one of, what's his name, Chuck Lorre's pieces, and he's actually been in television for a really long time. He started with Grace Under Fire, then he went on to Sybil, then he went on to Dharma and Greg, then he went on to 2.5 Men, and yeah, this is the last one in the series, so it's the Big Bang Theory. So he's been making sitcoms for, like, decades. And it's actually kind of interesting because you can see like how men have progressed like through the decades as sitcom characters if you like do watch all of those shows in a row. Like one of the things that is really important to understand is Big Bang Theory is actually I think it's still got its demo still women. So it's actually men written for a female audience, not even though it's nerds. So the characters that they're actually doing are supposed to be, like the target audience is basically married women above 30. And that's why that's kind of the characters that they're aiming for. That Penny is supposed to be, when they're watching them, it's actually that they're supposed to see themselves as her. When they were younger. It's supposed to kind of return to those memories. And the other characters are actually supposed to be a reflection of the men in their life, which will usually be their husbands and at this point, their kids. And that's why these characters aren't really able to grow up. That it's actually a means of just allowing them to actually relate to these particular characters. And it's actually a really good model for making this, like, getting an audience for the show and making it watchable in the current climate.
Wow. Suburban moms are horrible people. If that's how they see their husbands and their children, wow, that's not a very good...
But it's just they're like all of the characters are like really like children. Like they're not doing any complicated relationship stuff, and they're not like they're very much but they're very much in like a high school mentality, And this is this is how you set up an audience if you want that particular demographic as it was, because this is something that they want to watch with their kids. Like, you want to have the entire family watching it. So that's that kind of thing. Is it's like, it's not dark, and even like Howard isn't really engaging in sex as much as he's engaging in very elaborative role play. Like, whenever you have him talking about a sexual conquest, it'll be someone dressing up as a specific costume, and that's done on purpose. That you can allude to the act without saying the act, and it allows it to be childish. So it allows, again, like, it allows the parents to never feel uncomfortable with their children being there.
Yeah, but the problem with saying that, they're childish that mothers can say, well, it's okay for the kids to watch, is why aren't the female characters childish? Or are they?
No, they're meant to be, again, it's what the women are supposed to do is imagine themselves as Penny. That, like, again, in her relationship, no one completely understands their significant other, or his friends. And when you're having kids, no one 100% understands what their kids are doing. So her kind of confusion, but her, like, again, she's always depicted as being superior to everybody else. Like, keep in mind that, like, he did Dharma and Greg, where Dharma was considered to be, like, in control of all of the situations, despite being, like, a horrible hippie. So it's a deliberate attempt to just resonate with the audience.
Okay, but that's the thing. That's what I'm getting at. Is like, so in order to resonate with 30-something suburban mothers, you have to give them a character that doesn't interact with the other characters in the setting on an equal playing field, and is in fact superior to the other characters on the playing field. Like, yeah.
Well, she doesn't have any sexual agency as well. So, like, she's not really engaging in sex. Like, meaning that she's not actively trying to have sex. Like, she seems to, like, bounce into it a whole bunch of times. But, like, that's one of the other weird things about how they're kind of placing her, is that she is a sexual character, but it's always that other people are projecting that onto her. She doesn't control her own sexual agency. And this is, again, a way of just making women feel comfortable when watching this particular character, so you can sell them things. Like, sorry, from the perspective of, you're like, that's bad. And I'm like, yes, it is. But this is how we sell you things. So this is the structure that we would have set up.
Okay, well, that sort of explains stuff, because I guess I'm just an outlier. As I would prefer a more equal playing field and more equal interactions between the characters, but I don't actually watch Big Bang, so I'm speaking out of ignorance.
There is a good contrast show for this, because we are talking about, and I'm gonna let Sage say this in a second, but here's a good one. I don't know if any of you guys watched the Drew Carey show, and the main character was this nerdy kind of guy, and his friends were sort of complete dorks, but maybe not traditional dorks. They were, but actually no, they did go to comic book conventions and things like that as well. But you contrast the two side by side, and one is really, really playing it safe, and one of them is really talking about serious problems of being an older adult.
Yeah. Basically, it's good to just talk about that historically, but it's basically the internet and, like, how being able to show sports 24/7 shifts the demographic so that men are pulled out. So when the Drew Carey show was around, they would actually be targeting more men. And if I remember correctly, they did, like, car commercials and whatnot. And car commercials are the best commercials you can have. They're the most profitable. So I think that would be why, at that time, they would be doing that with Drew, and they would be focusing on those characters to get that demo, probably to focus on car commercials and alcohol.
I think you should take it away, Sage.
Sage, go.
Okay, so basically, The Big Bang Theory is a TV show that fucks up my Google results whenever I want to research cosmology. But I'm lying, I don't read. The Big Bang Theory is everything wrong with nerds. I mean, nerds are supposed to be passionate, awkward people. You can't make them famous. Big Bang Theory is a show that actually needs low ratings and sympathy viewers to be representative. They aren't even nerds. Some say you can't say what a real nerd is, but I say, yeah, you can. The real nerds are in their backyard sheds gnawing nervously on a welding mask while hooking up a motorcycle to a dehumidifier for some reason. A real nerd never brushes his hair, and his only family never asks him to pay rent for the basement because they're secretly terrified he will chemically alter their cat. Nerddom doesn't even fucking exist anymore. It's the new pop culture. We must distinguish pop nerds and the nerds no one ever talks about. Letting nerds into pop culture is like letting undertakers organize frat parties. We've given a supposedly awkward rich cocksuckers with product placement bar tricks delivering formulaic punchlines to a studio audience of warbling air horns duct taped to the on position. And everyone who watches the show thinks they're cool because they have Wolverine on their pillowcases. So let me guess what the next episode's going to be. The guys are going to be slapping an Oculus Rift against an Alienware. The girlfriends are going to be standing near the coffee maker and acting superior. Sheldon will piss someone off. Howard will try to touch a boob. And Leonard will whine like a little bitch about relationships he never actually does anything about. So inoffensive, flim-flam, fan service, and 18,000 obligatory references to Batman later, I got bored and stopped watching. I'd rather see what happens when I hook up a dead beetle to a car battery because that's what nerds do.
Wow. Ginger Rage.
That's a real nerd right there.
The Ginger Rage. It is strong with Sage. Wait, I made a rhyme!
Actually, there was something I wanted to ask Matthew. So why don't you give us a rundown of how the male characters have changed in sitcoms? Because you alluded to that, but you didn't really flesh that out, and that interests me.
Okay, so basically what you have to understand is like different commercials generate different amounts of money. And men actually don't do a lot of the purchasing decisions in the house. They do the major decisions, like vehicles, and things like insurance and those sort of things, and alcohol and razors are basically the only thing that you can market to men, while women will tend to buy like every single food item in the house. But what happens is, as I said, they get sucked right into sports. That sports and the internet, they really got on to like streaming stuff and torrenting stuff really soon. So a lot of their demo was like shifted out. So the main thing that you started with is if you go to like Married with Children and whatnot, you end up with a husband that really dislikes his wife, that most of the conflict is sort of coming from the fact that his wife is sort of nagging with him. And then as it happens, you keep that relationship, but the wife starts to become smarter and smarter as they realize that increases the number of women that are watching it, and that makes it easier for them to sell more products as it was. And then as it went on, because you can't really have two equal level characters and smart characters, you basically shift it down so that the female takes over the central role, and the male kind of devolves into this sort of child. And the reason is that men don't feel as uncomfortable while watching that. They actually like think that what the guys, if he's doing fun things, they're willing to embrace that stereotype, and then the woman is able to more like relate to the female character as she's a sort of superior position, and that's kind of how it shifted. The main point is that like in the current generation, basically people are getting married later, and there's this kind of thing that they still want to believe that they're cool. So you're starting to see this again in marriage couples now. They'll tend to be less married and unhappy and have children, and more be focusing on sort of the marriage relationship with their friends, and that's to skewer the demographic lower, and because reality television is actually a really good way of just sucking in just the female demographic. Reality television is basically female sports. So again, the newer shows, you'll get characters that are in a relationship but are still in that kind of friends thing. So that's why How I Met Your Mother, you had Lily and Marcia married for so long. But they were still kind of both children to each other and fighting and engaging in weird sex and engaging in these weird kind of things, so that if you related to them as a married couple, you could at least say, oh, we're not old and married, we're still doing those cool things. I can relate to those characters.
Wow.
That's an interesting...
So technically, what you're saying is that they are playing up women's egos to make them feel more comfortable so that they're more open to buying the things that they advertise during the commercial breaks.
Yes, like, that's television.
Holy shit.
I like that. That's really good.
Mind blown.
Well, the other thing is that why isn't there, if this is a female consumer dominated market, why isn't there a group of masculinists, or I won't even say men's rights activists because I don't think we even bother with this, but a masculist going in and judging everything like there seems to be with gamer culture?
I'm not sure, but I think the main reason is it's like, again, I'll use the patriarchy here, but what you want to do is you want to have people feel like they're in control without being in control. And how they position the women there is it really allows them to feel superior about themselves without sort of dictating things. Like, one of the other examples it's important to understand is like Criminal Minds or any of these shows that you'll often hear people who care about media representation like crying out against how the women are depicted have mostly female audiences. Women actually really like shows where they're tortured and killed for some unknown reason. A good example was when Spike bought the rights to CSI, they were, the channel for men, and they actually had, during the CSI period, they actually had over 51% women watching it. So, again, there isn't a lot of proper analysis, and you'll find that I talk about this a lot, but I talk about how what you'll find is a lot of the public discourse that women are doing on sort of media representation is inevitably not to change public consciousness, but to attract readers, to have people buy their book or to, read their articles. So you tend to focus on sort of tropes that women can think are bad, even if they're actively engaging with them and actually choosing those shows. And it just gets this kind of thing where it's like, oh my God, I'm so offended, I'm going to have to watch this kind of thing. And I am unsure of why there isn't more like strong conversation about this, or like, for lack of a better word, forming like a book club, but for a television show, so that people could watch it and then discuss it in a greater context and have it be like more of a social experience and them learning more about it. Like, that would be really cool if that could happen. But it's kind of like, nah, they're ingesting the content and buying the product. We're fine with this system. And you'll find, again, even the people who are criticizing it are like, we're making money. People are buying our books and reading our news articles. Why change it?
Shit.
But like, none of this is like, we had board meetings on this kind of thing. Like, this is well discussed in the media, in like when you're creating content. Like, none of this is at all would be controversial, even as I'm discussing it. So
what you're essentially saying is that the people who are the people who are criticizing this state of affairs are equally invested in maintaining it.
Yeah, there is very little interest in actually creating, like, especially like flawed female characters is a good example. Like, I wrote a script called Headhunters, which was about people who worked as employment consultants. So they got people hired and they got people fired. And it had this female protagonist that like everybody was amazed by. And it's like, how did you write this character? And I'm like, oh, we just changed her gender like 80% of the way through production, and then just kept it like that. And it was just this character who was very, very sure of herself, but at the same time, it's not that she disliked women. It was more that she considered them to be taking advantage. Like, she would do things in social situations that would mess with stereotypes, as it was. And it was just very weird. Like, the head of development at CBC at the time was just like, I love this character. How did you write it? And we're like, we kind of wrote her as if she was we wrote her so that her gender wouldn't matter, but we also made it so that she really, and then we added that she really liked being a woman. And then suddenly that became really empowering and like a character that was out there. But it was also just, again, she was a very, very odd character because she was Muslim, but she, like, instead of covering her hair with a hijab, she just always wore hats, etc., and so forth. So she was even in that kind of a religious stereotype without you knowing, and but it became a plot point in particular episodes and stuff. And they were just like, this is a really interesting character, but we have no idea how the audience will accept it. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That's why we wrote it like that. But even that kind of stuff, as you get into the board meetings or as you move into PR or as you move into advertising, like advertising the actual show, those things just get slowly ground away because people don't know how people will react to it. So, again, in the Big Bang Theory, none of those characters hasn't been tried, at least to some extent, in something else. Even Raj. Like, you can, there was various shows that used an Indian character like that, and it's just they don't want to take those risks, and then you end up with these stereotypical female representations.
Well, there's actually a bunch of stuff that I wanted to comment on that. What you just said. Hey, Rachel, I'm talking. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff that I wanted to comment. Anyway. There's a bunch of stuff that I wanted to comment on what you said, Matt. First of all, it's interesting how the people who are creating this media and advertising, they're essentially fluffing women's egos. And I can see how that would cause women to go out and buy stuff. Yes. Because it's a way of you get that letdown afterwards. You want to fill yourself up with a special thing and feel special, so you go out and buy. Yeah, that's incredibly manipulative. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the Penny being. Yeah. I know that she's not now the only female character, but it's interesting that in the show about nerds, it sounds like there are no nerd women, and I'm guessing it's that same issue that they don't know how to approach us, because I think that one of the big differences between nerd and geek women and the women that are being marketed to is that we see ourselves less in terms of our womanhood and in terms of our interests and our fandoms and our geeky, like various stuff. And it's just like, I find that really fascinating. And I'm going to cede the floor to you and then to Rachel. I'm sorry, Rachel, I can't actually see the thing indicating that you speak. Okay, go ahead, Matt. Go and answer that.
It's what you're talking about is just power and submission. That you want to have a character that the man takes the central role and she aids him in what he's doing is sort of the thing. Or you'll see that the female character will not be doing a lot of action, but will be able to cause actions by her ability to manipulate social situations. And this is why you tend to have female characters that are beautiful, female characters that are well-connected. All of it is because, again, society is more comfortable seeing a character like this, but women would more relate to that sort of thing. And this is why when you see things like, say, Kill Bill, for example, Kill Bill hasn't sort of come up as like a feminist piece, because it's all of this woman continually doing action, like she's killing everything. So even though she's like horribly empowered, it doesn't tend to resonate with the audience as much. And like even that show, that kind of a movie, again, it's obviously made for men, but it's still like the men are more able to relate to this character than women are. And this is, again, it's just there isn't enough language in society to be created so that women can actually digest these kind of characters. But even then, like, again, we did a project where it was like, why are you making the game? Because the game's awesome and it will make money. And then people, like, literally even people in the community for women technology were like, I don't know if women should make games for money. And I'm like, yes, they should. But that's a common cycle, a sociological construct.
I just want to say something really quick, and yes, Rachel, I'll cede the floor. how do you know that it's men doing this? Because I'm thinking that a lot of this is jealousy towards the female characters who actually take action and take part in the action. And go, Rachel. Sorry.
See, the thing about it is that for me, when you said like that men have more in common or feel more tied to the character of the bride in Kill Bill, I don't feel that's correct at all. In fact, I really that's actually one of my favorite movies. It's like I really do love that movie, and I really do think that they cover some female issues. I mean, her entire motivation is because she feels like the one thing that she had that did not belong to her previous life was now gone. The only thing that she was willing to give up her life for was now gone, and she completely lost it, of course. And she was also betrayed by her, her ex-lover and all that other stuff. I mean, but if you want to say that, though, there are a lot of characters, like male characters in action films, that people cannot relate to. I mean, who, or even in just regular films, like who can actually relate to Patrick Bateman? I mean, sure, you can relate to the whole feeling like you're conforming and things like that, but not everybody directly relates to these kinds of anti-hero characters, period.
No, and it's important to say, like, just because, like, the line we use is, you're not statistically significant. Like, you can totally be fine with engaging with the bride. Our thing is that if we were marketing it, if we were trying to raise as much money as possible, we'd just let you slide.
There is a problem, though, with the way that people go about writing strong female characters, because there is the Xena Buffy problem, which is that when they try to write a strong, capable character, they can't have people who are equally capable around them as much. They have a tendency to go slip into that lazy writing and then just make the women incredibly overpowered and then make all the men incredibly incompetent.
Yeah, the line that we use is a character isn't entitled, but it isn't. A character isn't defined by their abilities, they're defined by their flaws. And the problem in writing in television right now is being a woman is considered one of their flaws. But yeah, it's difficult to actually, like, again, what you're talking about here, where they kind of emphasize all the men to make her more powerful. That's, again, it is just lazy writing, but it is just because, again, you want to be able to tune into any episode of Buffy or any episode of Xena and actually, like, know the context of what's going on, even if you've done that halfway, even if you've tuned in halfway, and that's why they continually reiterate these points.
Just really quickly, what do you mean by being a woman is a flaw?
That when you're writing the character, that she has to overcome being a woman.
So what you mean is she's an underdog. That's not a flaw. That's generally considered a flaw with society, not the woman herself. No,
it's like, let's say you've got a character who's, like, has the ability to, like, punch stuff and fly. Those for writing, those are less significant than, say, he has, like, a phobia, or he's lost his wife or something like that. Those are the points that you'll use to actually establish the emotions of the character. Because when he's sort of achieving, like, punching through walls and stuff, you don't really dive into characterization. And one of the things that, as I said, happens with when writing female characters is that writers tend to consider the being female to be a flaw, and thus they use it as a means of characterizing the character, which is only stupid if half of your characters are women and then suddenly they all have to get over this particular flaw.
You know, I can see that. I still don't completely get behind characterizing it as a flaw. But
no, it isn't, and it shouldn't be. It's just seen as, like, for lazy writings, or like how you'd structure a script. That would be it. And,
well, I mean, not a flaw, as in, like, but as the idea that that's a character flaw versus trying to say something about society. not I don't know what they expect society to do, because obviously you don't get to be a grizzled anti-hero by society coddling you in blankets and giving you warm milk, which is what they seem to want to do with female characters, to turn them into grizzled anti-heroes. That whatever. But Sage, you've been sort of stepped on quite a bit, so why don't you come and Sage, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm here. No, I'm here. We already kind of left the topic where I was wanting to contribute here, but I would say, though, that given the... I remember in our last show that I was on, we were talking talking about Attack on Titan, and Rachel and I had a conversation about the overpowered... what was her name? I forgot her name.
Mikasa Ackerman.
Mikasa, thank you. I mean, we are having a discussion about that regarding the overpowered, essentially flawless female character, and the issue that I've always had with it was it's when it comes to any sort of a show when I identify with a character, I need to see flaws. I mean, I need to see an imperfect character, and if we're going to be looking at when I was wanting to come into this, I was thinking more in terms of the selling to women, which I thought was an absolutely incredible point, because given the huge control women have over the consumer market. But when it comes to that kind of flattery, I'm really starting to wonder, though, like, is any character development just going to be... Is it just going to keep going down this path until it just becomes so exaggerated women are only going to be depicted in this way? Is that kind of a trend?
Yes, until people stop watching it.
Really? Okay.
Sorry, and until people stop watching it, or until people stop buying stuff, like, we won't stop.
So I'm just curious, if you were to just suddenly swap out the demographics, there's just no way that is that just like a wild card way to get the demographic you're flattering to just buy more things? Like, would that demographic, like, if you were to do it for men, if you were to completely do an overpowered depiction of men, would men in a timely fashion come over and start buying in that same way, or would it take a lot more time?
First of all, like, again, you if you watch, say, sports, you'll still see, like, look at this awesome car, look how powerful it makes you feel, you're awesome. Like,
I'm just curious, though, like, if what I'm thinking is, since we're seeing a trope about overpowered women, and we see a lot of flattery going toward men as well. I'm wondering, just like, is there some sort of timetable that business owners operate on, where they can kind of set a schedule where they will actually just set a timeline for flattery, where they will just kind of flatter every demographic one after the other, just for the purposes of increasing revenue that way? Because I'm not too sure. What I'm having trouble with is I'm not too sure if there's just a trend toward women specifically, and men are going to be kind of additionally marginalized or misrepresented in the way that you've talked about earlier, where women kind of usurp that role, or if there's just kind of this is just kind of a phase that will end up switching demographics in time no matter what.
Okay,
I'm not clear on that.
The big shift is, again, men love their sports and love their technology, and thus you can't sell them things if they're streaming stuff. So you'll find, like, that's the big issue. Like, if we were to outlaw sports, and if we were to suddenly have a way of everything not being streamed, then you would have a shift. A good example, though, would be, I think, Netflix, for example. I think they have more of a male demographic. And then you'll see, like, House of Cards is sort of how they're depicting their characters is, like, much different than you would see on a show that's on even cable or broadcast, because they're going for more of a male demographic. Or, for example, even that one with the horse that they have is that sort of an animated thing. That's probably going for a male demo as well. And you'll see that he's actually in more of a superior role in relationship to a bunch of other things there. And like all of lot of the female characters are horribly unrelatable because of that. Actually, those kind of animated cartoons tend to have male demos. So you'll notice that in a lot of ones, like, even the Fox stuff, you'll see that happening.
Yeah, but the thing is that the female characters in media targeted at females are also unrelatable because they have no flaws. They're essentially just a power fantasy.
Well, there's also. I mean, let me go ahead and I can talk about the male demo in this area. I mean, how many of you know about that old show Columbo?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I've seen a few episodes.
Okay, so Columbo crime show back in the 70s about a detective. For those of you who don't know, about a detective that, in essence, it looks like a bumbling, incompetent fool. But however, his compensating factor is that he's extremely wise about people. Now he's and he tends to be so approachable and nice that the criminals he's trying to catch end up volunteering information to him because he's so easy to talk to. But the thing that makes Columbo a more relatable character to me is because he is very heavily flawed. Whereas if you look at crime shows today in terms of numbers or Lie to Me or something like that, the male protagonists in those shows have these ridiculous space brains who are able to deduce, who can deduce pretty much the basic laws of nature if you give them a hair. And it ends up getting to the point where you lose that sense of humanity, and it does become. And I don't even really see it as a power fantasy for men. Even I see it more as just masturbation.
That's for another reason, sorry. That's because like they're basically, again, because of like streaming and watching things like the next day on demand, they kind of shift to more of each episode being an event. So like the Blacklist is like insane how like two major things happen like every episode, and you'll see the kind of focus to having these like superhero characters is so that when they're promoting the episode, they can suck people in more. Like
so it's kind of like they're advertising it kind of like monster truck rallies.
Yeah, that's more like the thing about Columbo was that you'd watch it every day because there was nothing else on. Like you'd watch it every day because you couldn't then stream it or you didn't have other means of technology. It was an event that you went to every day and then you talked about it the day afterwards. Mm-hmm. And that's why they can do that kind of thing.
I see.
Yeah, that's the major shift, and that's why again you'll just see that like newer shows, again, why there's so much superhero stuff that's kind of leaked into television is for that same reason, that we can make it.
I gotta tell you though, it's actually in some ways it's enlightening, but also depressing to hear about how the realities of business affect the way we express ourselves. But yeah, I could see the pragmatics behind it.
Yeah. Well, we can go on to the next topic if you want.
Well, this is really fascinating. I'm imagining that we're going to end up in this particular area of talk throughout this entire radio show, though. So I guess we could go to the next topic.
Yay! Oh, do we want to do Doctor Who or Watchmen? Because Watchmen is really long. I don't know what Ellen made it really long.
It's like how long is it?
I don't. Oh, it's longer than mine. Well, mine isn't very lengthy. I was just trying
but yours is thick, right? It's thick.
No. Oh, okay. Oh, wonderful. Okay, it says okay, most of the feminists I've seen writing about Watchmen are torn. They think it's a great story, but they're not sure if it's right for them to like. Near the beginning of the story, Ursula's aunt and her girlfriend Gretchen are pictured murdered in a bed with the words lesbian whores written over the headboard in their own blood. This incident doesn't get much further attention aside from Rorschach's comment that they were killed by their own depraved lifestyle. Considering Ursula was a superhero, it seems odd that she and Gretchen were killed and possibly sexually assaulted by what we presume to be ordinary men. Personally, I think this incident legitimately deserves gender-conscious critique, but it's not the main point that feminists have written about. Most of the feminist critique discusses the relationship between Sally Jupiter, the original Silk Spectre, and the comedian. Sally is almost raped by the comedian Blake, until two superheroes come to rescue her. That was called out as an implausible female victim trope. In other words, even a superhero, if she's a woman, can't protect herself from rape. The other problem is that Sally never escapes that trope. She falls in love with Blake, having daughter Lori with him, even though she supposedly never forgives him. She is characterized as sexual to the point that she finds porn herself flattering. As a side note, my feeling about the porn scene is that Watchmen's creators are actually bringing to light and criticizing the ultra-sexualization of women in comic books. However, after all, the porn she's looking at is a comic book. Later, I found some further debate about Sally. blogger Noah, I'm going to butcher this name, Berlatsky, writes that she brings to mind the, quote, woman falling for her rapist trope, unquote, which he calls, quote, a standard of misogyny, unquote. But he goes on to say that in this case, Sally's relationship with Blake is more complicated than the converted by rape idea. After all, it is not unrealistic to portray someone being attached to an abuser. Is the depiction of Sally's life after her assault misogynistic, or is it just a portrayal of an uncomfortable truth? Finally, some have suggested that since Alan Moore is a man and presumably not a rape victim, he shouldn't be portraying this at all. Is that a legitimate critique? I'm not actually sure. I'm not a fiction writer. But I think that if I wanted to write about something I haven't been through, I might spend a lot of time talking to someone who had experienced it. If Alan Moore didn't have that conversation, is the writing reprehensible? Wow, this is involved. I was thinking.
Let's just stop it there. Let's just stop it there, and we'll discuss it, because there's some answers to those questions. First of all, where's the assumption that Alan Moore being a man, couldn't have possibly been a rape victim? Where's that coming from? I assume that's the feminist commentators. And then, I mean, if you're going to throw out this idea that we shouldn't define women as victims, you just, bam, right there. You've defined a form of victimhood as women only. And then the other thing is, how is that trope misogynistic? A rape victim falls in love with her rapist, when that happens to male rape victims in fiction all the time, too. I mean, I think about Vaughn character in Wedding Crashers. Raped, and then who does he end up with? His rapist. So I don't see how that could possibly be misogynistic. It's just it's something that applies to both male and female characters in fiction. For some reason, human beings have this thing about rape equals love, as quoting TV tropes.
Well, the thing about it is that she doesn't actually really fall in love with Blake. The whole thing that they're discussing is that she did have sex with him the one time. Maybe they were drinking. They never really go into it, and that's how Laurie was conceived. They never really. It was a one-night stand kind of situation that took place years after the incident. And she didn't really say that she loved him. In fact, she said that, that what was happening is that as she was getting older and she felt herself aging and the good old days going away, that they started to seem better and better, even the bad parts. So what it's saying is she's looking fondly onto things, not necessarily because they were good, but because they seem better than her life now, which is very, very dull. She's living in a retirement home out in California, and it's just
and the other thing is
just not very light.
Is it like her conception? I don't remember her name, but her conception was a plot point. Yeah, Laurie's conception was a plot point because it led to Dr. Manhattan seeing the beauty in human life, because two people who hated each other actually, I don't know, it was an impossible conception.
Yeah, that something so good could come out of something so terrible, out of, a person that was so terrible, and that there really wasn't much that really could be, there's no way you can make the comedian seem to be a nice guy, like, ever. Because he kills people, he's an almost rapist, he doesn't think, like, He doesn't have any qualms about, punching a woman in the face, is basically. He doesn't have any problem with shooting a pregnant woman. There is nothing that is really all that great about him.
But he has no qualms about hitting a man in the face either. So at least he's equal opportunity.
Or killing children. And I remember he gives this sort of monologue to Moloch, who is his who is an ex-villain and has cancer, and while he's totally drunk, losing his mind, basically saying that, he did a lot of bad things, but nothing like this. And that he was really feeling terrible about it. And the thing about it is, we don't know what was really going on in Comedian's head. There's nothing really, you can't really excuse any of his bad behavior, but you start to understand why he was drinking all the time. He did a lot of bad things. He's rather, would you call him amoral? He doesn't really.
Well, let's put it this way. Rather than having our particular moral conceits, he's violent towards absolutely everyone.
Yeah.
So he doesn't exclude any groups of people. So in that sense, he's sort of an equal opportunity psychopath. You wanted to say something, Matt? I could hear you.
Well, I was just going to say, like, again, it's just important to understand in context that, like, after the Watchmen, Alan Moore went on to write Batman: The Killing Joke, which is it's a long book on the Joker, basically, and it defines a lot of his mythos and a source of psychology, like, of him. So the comedian and the Joker actually, like, share a lot of concepts. There's just one of them is more like of a protagonist and the other is a pure antagonist. So it's like, again, like you can see a lot of what they were kind of coming up with the comedian would eventually be taken into, like, almost used as sort of a trial run for some of the tropes some of the ideas that were then moved into Batman: The Killing Joke. But again, I was reading the Feminist paper on it, and I'm like, Alan Moore wrote Lost Girls and From Hell. And if you're, like, complaining about The Watchmen, then you then don't read the rest of his work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I think the thing about and I haven't read that particular comic, The Killing Joke, comic. Actually, now I think about it, never mind. Anyway. The thing about it is that the whole point of the comedian, where they talk about a bit about his psychology, is that he is not he is immoral for a reason, because he sees that human beings, that mankind as a whole, or at least in his mind, is savage, and he is just not hiding it. He is the person who is not hiding the savageness of humanity, the terrible side of humanity. He's not sweeping it under the rug. He's engaging with it full force.
Yeah, and this is, like, again, this is when so much of Alan Moore's work, like, not all of it, but almost all of it, you'll find that his characters are, like, deliberately, they're meant to be sort of an ideal, and then it's how those different ideals interact with each other is sort of a reflection of society in and of itself. So, again, when I'm reading these sort of criticisms, I'm like, these aren't supposed to be realistic representations of characters. These are supposed to be, like, more manifestations of ideas and how those ideas interact with each other. So to project, like, a standard sort of character trope onto this kind of thing is not, like, I understand why you could do that, and you could then criticize him maybe for doing lazy writing for that, but it isn't moving into that stereotype. It's just like these are their structural ideals that he's trying to kind of move. I'm looking at a lot of this criticism, and I'm just not buying it. That's what my basic line is.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot going on in Watchmen, and the thing is I read the comic and I rewatched the movie back to back just to try and see the contrast. The movie, it almost feels like a watered down version, because everything within the comic book version is very symbolic, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs, little inside jokes, like the Gunga Diner is like a pun on Gunga Din, which I looked up. It was it's a poem by, I think, Rudyard Kipling about an Indian native who sacrifices himself, who dies trying to tend to, I think, British soldiers, and he dies, and he is seen as being better for having died for the greater good, and being better than the white soldiers because he was so noble. And the thing is that there is this feeling of impending doom throughout, and little bits, little hints throughout, things in the background for what's to come later on. That there is going to be someone who is going to die for the greater good, being, of course, Rorschach, who does die, and he is made to suffer, and he is seen as being a lesser being
Yeah.
But he is seen as being better for having died for everyone. So that's the kind of weird thing.
All of Moore's work, the written work, is meant to be read multiple times, which is great. Like, you're supposed to, again, because it was serialized, you're supposed to go back to earlier books to then understand the full story. So you'll often have points that were deliberately obscured. There was no way to get them later in the story, returning back to the beginning. And you can't do that in a movie, because you can't tell the projectionist, rewind 20 minutes and let me see that scene again.
Absolutely. And another thing is, there's the comic within a comic that is really telling, because you see the sailor and he is riding on a raft made of human corpses, the corpses I think of as fallen kinsmen. And so not kinsmen, his fellow sailors. So it's sort of saying humanity surviving on the deaths of others, on the backs of others, literally. So it's living on the dead.
Yeah, no, he just, again, he does this kind of symbolism in all of his work, and he, again, it's meant to be to basically break down culture, create ideals from that, and have them interact with each other. And it's difficult to then criticize these characters for using traditional tropes. It's difficult because they're meant to do things. They're meant to act in very particular ways so that even the audience can know how they're going to act beforehand. The characters tend to you tend to know how a character is going to react. It's the situation that puts them in that creates the drama.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on in Watchmen that you could write probably 5 books on just the philosophy of Watchmen, for the different character perspectives, even Dr. Manhattan. That's a thing that I've been seeing recently, which is what happens is you have a character that begins as human or maybe even human-like, and then eventually, slowly but surely, gets to this point where they become godlike. So godlike, in fact, that they cannot relate with other people. Yeah. And it's that separation, it's that feeling of solitude coming from the inability to relate with everybody else around you.
Yeah, he's actually apparently an adaptation of Spock, and that. But what you said was exactly what Alan Moore wanted to actually do. That he just wanted to have a character who was emotionless but had human habits slowly lose them, and he wanted that to be kind of a meditation on humanity itself.
Yeah, as we become more advanced, or as we create things that become more mentally advanced than even ourselves, they themselves become almost like gods. You see that in the movie Her, for example, where she starts out as sort of regular human intelligence with the ability to learn, and then eventually she gets to the point where she has the mind of essentially this all-powerful goddess, and she has gotten to this point that is beyond humanity, and she can no longer relate to it. No longer relate to human morals or anything like that, or maybe doesn't even care about human morals anymore because she has risen above that. Those things don't seem to be important anymore.
No, and yeah, this is just a standard thing with power, and just eventually how all power corrupts, and it's kind of a new way of adapting on this, where instead of it just being power in a human society, it's the power to transcend it. And it's kind of again, what happens when you have presidents or kings, or these people that are by definition super, almost by more than human, and people even treat them that way. How do you psychologically work in that space?
Well, that very much explains how, and I know this is a little bit of a tangent, how people like child stars become so bad off later on in life, because they get to a point where they feel like they are greater or they're treated a certain way very, very young, very early, and suddenly that is pulled out from under them. They peak very early.
Well, it's not only that, but it's exactly what you were talking about. How they basically reach this point of having so much power that they're like more than human, that they have unlimited resources, and nobody's treating them like everything they do is happening. But then that all like slowly dissolves away as they lose their fame and they lose their money. That
Exactly.
It's like becoming human afterwards. It's the like almost the flower for Algernon or whatever you want to refer to it as.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is again. I've only occasionally dealt with those sort of people, but it's a really weird thing because it's like you've actually like there's sections of your. Again, there's sort of a shared human experience. There's moments that they've just completely removed. Again, Justin Bieber, for example, he's basically had women trying to sleep with him for such a point that it's like even the concept of how you would sort of engage in a relationship would be something that he just would have that part of his memory missing.
Wow.
Yeah, well, again, we use Justin Bieber as an interesting point, but you find it with a lot of things where it's just like there's just a part of this experience that they don't have, but it's like a really important part of like what it is like as a shared human experience, and because they don't have it, suddenly like other things just don't become relatable. One of the lines was that the first writer we used for the Sinless production, we wanted to have a writer who self-identified as black. We were telling him to like write the setting like a Dungeons and Dragons setting, and he was this nerd, and he loved comic books, and then he eventually said like, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, oh my god, I have Dungeons and Dragons privilege over him. But it was like But it was this point where I was like, oh, he's never played. This explains why he's having so many problems and why he's always angry at us. Is like he's never had this experience in this kind of a piece. But it's just really weird how, again, that one sounds not particularly peculiar because lots of people haven't played Dungeons and Dragons. But when you're you're hiring him to be a comic book writer to write nerd-based stuff, it's just like, what? You haven't read a rule book before? Like, oh, God, we have to explain so much stuff to you.
I wanted to actually say something to that, this idea of missing whole aspects of human experience. If you look at it in terms of the socialization that women have, even the flattery that happens with these advertisers wanting to get women to purchase stuff, women do not get the same kind of experience of rejection and shaming as boys do. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Toronto, you have the white ribbon campaign going into I think middle schools and telling boys in middle schools that they're responsible for violence against women, and that there's this huge aspect of shaming and responsibility and guilt, putting guilt onto boys, but that in turn actually, because they have that experience, and it's a very nasty, it's not an experience that's necessarily a good thing. There are certain psychological benefits. You might call them benefits. One of them is that there's a greater focus on achievement rather than feeling like personally validated. And I don't know if you want to call it a benefit as much as an effect. And then there's also this thing that I don't think is as easy to flatter men with these super powerful, completely flawless characters, because they just don't. I don't think they identify with a male character the same way a female character identifies with a female character.
Well, it's important. Yeah, it's like a male character tends to be like his position is based upon what he does. A female character tends to be positioned on who they are.
What she experiences.
Yeah, and so do you know who that is? That's Karen Strawn. Growarts,
Hi.
what?
Yeah.
I'm
But
finally here.
You're fine in the corner there.
But if you make an uglier male character, it's more that he has to overcome. So inevitably speaking, the audience like considers him more powerful and like, and it's not that it's so much that he's easily relatable, but it's that they tend to side with him more.
I think actually one of the interesting things about male and female characters, and I've noticed this in in some fairly old science fiction and fantasy novels, like Ellen Kushner's Swords Point and the Gap series by Stephen R. Donaldson, was that I think the at least the male reader can really identify with a highly imperfect male protagonist.
Yes.
Right? And there's a reluctance, I think, on the part of male readers to accept that degree of flawedness in a female protagonist. It's almost like how can you present a woman as something that's that far from perfect, right? You know, she you should be showing her in the best possible light.
Well, the
right?
audience immediate reaction is to save her. That's the problem.
Well, and you either have to, if you want to have a very, very flawed, sometimes mean, right, female character, you have to either make her a villain or you have to rescue her and redeem her, right? But I mean, like, one of the Gap series was one of the most beautiful. It wasn't even what I would call a redemption, but of one of the main characters who starts out as the like he's just the scum of the galaxy, and in the end, when he escapes, you're actually like, oh, good for him, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't see that kind of, and I don't see women appreciating female characters like that the same way that men tend to appreciate male characters like that either.
If you have a female character that is like, again, if it's more of a like a political piece where she's basically manipulating situations so that she's always in the lead, they'll emote with her. They'll often like really hate her or hate her so much that they like her, like they want to be her, but she's so bad. Like that's the way that they tend to do it.
Yeah, you know, but I think you see this, and I think it's one of the pitfalls of writing women, that and why maybe a lot of men, and then of course when men try to write women as protagonists, and they and some reader somewhere feels that they got it wrong. And you can see shades of that kind of attitude in the race fail brouhaha that happened about 4 years ago or something in the science fiction and fantasy community. If you know you're obligated to write characters of this type, but if you don't write them so that they please everyone who identifies as that type of person, right? Then you're a racist or a misogynist or whatever, right? You're a epic fail, right? And so I think that a lot of male creators may shy away from writing females as protagonists, and they just want to keep them as supporting characters because it's safer.
No, you're right there. I find, again, it's sort of difficult to deal with criticism when another person is seen to be the expert, especially when they're not.
Well, I think as well too. I think that criticism is criticism, right? And we all can, basically having written and been involved in the romantic and erotica writers community. I mean, we know what a Mary Sue is. We know what a cardboard cutout female heroine is, where she's just the placeholder for the reader and she doesn't really have a personality of her own. And we know all it. And with gay male fiction, we're able to recognize what a chick with a dick is, right? When the female writer just wrote a man and a woman and put a penis on the woman, right? I mean, like, there's plenty of room for those kinds of criticisms, but I think when it comes to certain things like being angry at how a woman is represented, or being angry at how a black person of color is represented, or in many cases, lesbians especially, you look at the intensity of the criticism, right? And how the criticism is not, you wrote a bad character, or you wrote a subpar character, but you're a bad person, right? And that's, I think, that the difference between criticism and what tends to happen when an author or a writer or creator sort of flubs a little bit with stereotypes or all of this, right? Like, and what's Anita Sarkeesian's shtick, right? This isn't just, being lazy, it's misogynist.
Well, no, it's important to understand that it's never that they're a bad person, it's that the person making the criticism is a better person.
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah.
Because, you couldn't have a bad person without better people.
Yeah, again, sorry, this whole the whole problem with, again, the fine young capitalists is we freely admit that, we're making it to make money. And then when people, criticize us, they're we're morally superior than you. Then I'm like, of course you are. And then suddenly, the conversation dissolves almost in front of me, where it's you mean I can't berate you to make me feel better of myself? No, I will just agree to all of your points. And
wow, that's wow. I didn't realize that a prerequisite to being morally superior was being a bully.
Well, it's just
actually that's an age old trope.
Yeah,
I guess you're right.
You're a bully.
But,
you remember that Mrs. Olsen on Little House on the Prairie? Morally superior and a bully.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we need to move on to the next topic. We've really gone widely afield on this particular topic.
Tangents.
Yeah, tangents upon tangents upon tangent. And then Karen came in and introduced more tangents, and then we're up to our eyeballs in tangents.
Yes.
Yes, let's move on to...
We'll try to fit in Doctor Who in there somewhere, and if not, we'll push it over, because it's Doctor Who season. The Doctor Who is abundant.
It's time to reap some Who, right? Okay, let's go for
gosh, it's out, yeah. So, tell us a bit about your project and where things did get wrong, or where there was a bit of a discrepancy.
Okay, so we actually, talked to a whole bunch of groups about this, and, the main thing was that every single man we talked to was that would be awesome, I would totally sign up for that contest. But it was, just to reiterate, it's a woman comes up with an idea, we get them to work with take the top 5 ideas, we get them to work with concept artists to correctly show their idea, and then the internet chooses the best one, and if there's enough interest, we make the game and we give the profits to charity. And keep in mind, the woman can actually say, hey, everybody likes my games, stuff it, give it to the next person, the next who gets the next number of votes. So they're not ever forced to give the idea to charity. It's just most of them don't have programming experience or just can't raise a team to actually make it on themselves. But the criticism is that basically that this is some way exploitative to women because they're getting such a small percentage of the money. They're getting about 8% of the profits for writing about less than 1,500 words, which in any other medium is a really, really good deal. But it was just that people really saw that taking a woman, even if the game was made by other women in a developing country who were trying to expand the video game industry, that this was taking something from them. And it just became this thing where people would demonize everything that we're doing.
Okay, I just want to clarify something. So what you're doing is you're putting on a contest to help a female game developer develop a game, and you're employing women in a developing country to create the game in order to expand the game industry in that country, and also employ some female artists and game designers and et cetera. Yeah. So essentially you're doing exactly what they want to see. and they're not happy with it.
Okay, we think like there's a lot of social constructs that are going on here that we're trying to figure out why. So the biggest one seems to be that nobody wants to see women in a position of power making money. And one of the things that we mentioned was, I mentioned this to one of the reporters, that like Kickstarter for doing technological projects, like women are actually better at those than men. Women succeed, it's almost twice as often, but they succeed more often than men do. Whenever it's a project that it's like they're dependent upon somebody else to make the project. When it's like this project where we're like, no, we only want you to give money because you think it's going to make money. You're going to get the money back. It's just going to be a donation to charity in your name. They're like, no, none of that. It's like, if the patriarchy's still involved, if the women if we're still like saving her, then it's okay. But as soon as we take that out, there seems to be a lot of pushback on that. And again, it just kind of becomes like, why aren't you, supporting? Again, it always spirals down to like, why aren't you supporting women artists? I'm like, we are hiring women artists.
I think you're. So what you're saying is feminists are essentially not supporting something that doesn't cast women as a victim. In fact, it casts them as an equal partner in a capitalistic endeavor to make money. And what you're saying is that we, as a society, we're far more willing to donate to a woman than engage in a partnership and invest in her with the expectation that she make money and return on the investment.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that what you're finding is whatever you want to call it patriarchy. I would take issue with that particular word, but if that's the nomenclature you want to use, I will use it for the sake of argument. That I think you're finding that feminists are essentially a branch of it.
Well, I think, again, we like to just say that there's like lots of different versions of it, and like some feminists like got it right away. But there was this thing about, again, like to make it clear, when we started it, we didn't get that much feedback, and then there was a lot of controversy happening in the media. And because of that, 4chan found out about the project, and they started giving us money. And after the second day that 4chan gave us the most amount of money, I just tweeted that out, like, thank you, 4chan. And then suddenly it was just like, A, 4chan was happy because they were actually helping women. But B, it was like, you can't say that 4chan is helping women. And I'm like, I can't change reality. Like, they clearly are. And
yeah.
But I'd just like to, I know he's promised to be gentle, but I'd just like to revisit this point. I mean, if you're looking at the people who are arrayed against your project and you're looking at the people who are pushing it forward and keeping it viable, there's a definite demarcation here. Well, and the majority of the people who are trying to destroy your project are feminists.
Well, like, our big point here is, like, it seems to be that it's like they're not allowed to get in on this feminist thing. If we let anybody through the door, then it's going to ruin it for everybody. And I'm just like, that's not really how it works. And it's like, who said that? And I'm like, well, Audre Lorde for one. And it's like, you're not allowed to use Audre Lorde in that context. Like it's like I keep saying the master's tools was never dismantle the master's house. The line is basically that unless you let everybody in as part of the movement, you'll just be fighting constantly and never winning. And then they're just like, you can't use that quote. And I'm like, that in context, this quote is actually very good. But yeah.
What bothers me though is how often that they will sort of act as sort of like an exclusive club that you have to pass a whole bunch of tests, often tests in mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance and double standards and all kinds of other stuff like that.
Yeah.
In order to pass and get in. But on the other hand, they will very, very glibly state to anybody, oh, so you believe in women's equality? That means you're a feminist. Of course you're a feminist, right? And they will slap the sticker on you, right?
Well,
you say that you're for women's equality, right? At the same time, you're just one of their useful idiots. If that's what you're there for. You're there to stand you're a body under the banner. So that when that politician looks out of his window, while some feminist is saying, I'm a feminist speaking on behalf of feminists and women, and I want you to pass this law, and he looks out and he sees this big, huge banner, and there's all these people milling around under it, right? And half of them just got slapped with a sticker because they believe in the dictionary definition of feminism, but none of the feminists who are in power, none of the social justice-y, progressive, feminist people who run women's studies programs, who run domestic violence shelters, who influence media, like none of those feminists have any use for them, but other than as bodies under the banner. And the moment that you question anything or object to anything that they do, you're out.
Well, no, like the biggest issue was that a lot of them didn't understand the project and really criticized it.
I think they did.
And it's just become this thing that I have to apologize for being like punched in the face. Like, I'm sorry I made you all
ultimately
look.
Well, wait a second. I think from what I've understood, I have been following this for a long time. I do know that there was a discrepancy about the money, how the women were getting paid, and also the trans policy. I think that was what they began to attack. And then that's what began the boulder, the snowball effect, as it were.
Okay, if I were to write a 100,000 word novel and shop it to a traditional publisher, right? They would give me an 8% royalty if I was lucky.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. That 8%. That is, like, complaining about that is total bullshit.
Yeah.
Right?
Just
as for having women work for free on making the game, that's their time and their choice, isn't it?
Well, they weren't working for free, were they? They were being paid.
Well, every single woman, like, the people who came up with the idea, they get their art for free and everything else like that. Every other woman involved in the production was paid. We made sure of that. There has been this thing that if the woman's idea gets made, what if the game's a complete failure? And I'm like, well, we might just give it back to them afterwards. Like, we might supersede all the rights to them. Yeah. Like,
yeah, no, you were absolutely what your deal was. It was essentially boilerplate in the industry.
Yeah.
Right?
And
so don't give me any crap about how they misunderstood, and they thought women, that these people were objecting to women working for free, because there was nobody was working for free except for the idea creator, right? The creator, just like a novelist who writes a 100,000 word novel and tries to shop it somewhere and nobody wants to buy it. That's me technically working for free, right? And if they buy it and they sell it, they're only paying me 8%.
Yeah, and as I said, they got all their art and everything else like that, so it was at least a prize of some type. Like, we have no problem with them using that to then, like, get funding from somewhere else. But
sorry, Rachel, I just wanted to say this.
Go on.
Quickly.
I gotta keep my elbows, though. Keep going. Go, Allison.
Yeah, I never actually got into saying what I was going to say, is that the situation where I'm seeing is you're expecting people who have a racket around women remaining victims to tolerate this challenging the narrative. This is feminism in its powerful form. You can say that equity feminists or on the ground feminists or coffee shop feminists or all kinds of other things. But feminism is an institution that uses female victimhood to get stuff, and you were challenging it. But anyway, go ahead, Rachel. Or actually, Matt, respond.
Just to set, the biggest problem was that, yes, I know a lot of, again, I'm not gonna. The victim narrative is used. It was just in this particular case, they were kind of gloating over the fact that they crashed our site.
Of course.
And it's just been this thing where it's just like the mask really fell there. Like we almost
they don't want women to succeed. They want women to be victims because then they can use them politically.
Yeah,
frankly, your trans policy was perfectly reasonable. I'm guessing it was there to keep people like my boyfriend, who's 6 feet tall, 260 pounds, and covered with hair from head to toe like the evil panda, covered with neckbeard, from him going there and saying, well, I identify as a woman and I want to enter this contest.
Well, it was actually like I do want to tell the trans story, which everybody I enjoy, but we talk to so many people about it, and no one will address the issue of like, what do you do if the person's just lying to get something? So even like the San Diego Transgender Law Center, we have a letter from them saying we won't give an answer to this question, and I'm like, that's not very helpful at all. So we went to 501 Church, which is a social outreach center here in Toronto for the LGBT community. And we went there. We like to talk to somebody. We're running this video game contest, and we'd like to allow people who self-identify as women to enter, but we don't want people to lie about it. And the guy just went across the desk, and he gets in front of me, and he's like, what if I identified as a woman? And I was like, oh, okay, well, here's an application form. And he just looks at me and he's like, no, I was just saying that to make a point. And then I literally look at him, I'm like, now you see the problem that we're having. And it was just like, I think if I had like basically defecated on the floor, he would have been like less like pissed off than the moment he was at that moment where he was like, did I just say something transphobic and this white guy just caught me on it? It was just like this weird moment where it was like, you just lied about it to prove a point. They might lie about it to prove a point as well. We want to make sure everything's safe. How do we do that? And he was just like, I'm not talking to you. Talk to this person. And that person said, the language you should use is any member of the LGBT community. And we wrote her back, I don't think that gay men like to be called women anymore, nor do queers. Like, I don't think that gender identity and sexual identity should be confused in that way. And then they didn't write us back. So, like, there was a lot of, like, groups that we talked to who just would either not answer this question or would answer it particularly poorly. And what we actually went to is the homeless shelters, because they actually deal with so many trans individuals, and they actually have like, we'll only have so many spots open for women, so many spots up for a man. And I said, how's this issue come up? And then we say, yeah, you just ask them what they identify in at the beginning, and then you tell them which is open. It's that they can't change their change their identity once they've gone through the door, but they can self-identify with whatever they want. And we're like, oh, okay, that'll be the rules. They can't change their identity from the beginning of the contest. And that was the only thing. You could, transitioning was totally up to you. It was just you had to make that decision before the beginning of the contest. And about 8% of our contestants, nobody lied about being trans, but 8% of our contestants were people who lied about being men. They usually just made up false profiles, like they pretended they were applying under their wife's name or whatever, and we found out about it.
Yeah, I heard about that. And what I read from, I think I read your policy, and it was saying, I think where there was or at least where I think some of the confusion came from was where it was, you did mention, I thought it was rather clear. You said they had to have transitioned before the contest, and what you meant was that you had to have, come out to your friends and family, and basically people had to identify you as a woman beforehand. You didn't actually have to have the surgery, because not everybody who is trans gets the surgery or intends to.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's in line with GLAAD, and I forget which transgender rights association it is in the States, but we use we checked the word, and that was exactly what they said. Both of them specifically mentioned that you don't have to have sex reassignment surgery to transition. But apparently that confusion was lost, and this is where this is where the death threat came in, and our site being taken down, like our site going down.
You were DDoSed?
Twitter. Oh yeah, we were totally DDoSed. We were banned from Twitter for a while. That was fun. It was really like, I'm not sure if this is a bad or a good thing, but okay.
That's how Twitter wars go. And that's one of the reasons I abstained from joining Twitter for, I think, a very long time, because I could see how easily something that was very, very reasonable could be taken wrong by a bunch of people, and then suddenly had that snowball effect, and they're just like, oh my gosh, what happened? And then suddenly all these people will have turned against somebody for just something simple that they said. It really is completely ridiculous, because you see just the worst of humanity sometimes just being on Twitter. It's terrible.
Well, I get our favorite post. It's gone now because it's just been buried under everything else. But it used to be when you search for our name, it would be just a reminder that the fine young capitalists are the most obvious showing of oppression, but isn't the only kind. And it was from a person who advocates for people of color's rights. And I was like, are you jumping on the oppression bandwagon? Like, really?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. It really is ridiculous what has happened to you and all this, and it really shouldn't have happened. Could you tell us a bit about Vivian James?
Okay. So it was it's just been this 4chan thing, but it was like we said that if 4chan wanted to, they could combine their money for the larger prizes. And one of the ones was if you gave us $10,000, because we assumed that corporations would like this idea, you could get your logo in front of the game. And 4chan asked if they raised that collectively, could it happen? And we thought it was never going to happen. And we said, of course. And one of the $2,000 prizes, though, was to get your character designed. And they saw that as getting their character into the game. So when they reached that point, they asked, could they do it? And I said, well, depending upon what you come up with. And they just came up with this very, again, a girl who games, who's only really interested in games, and it was just a very the character had a lot of personality, but it wasn't a super sexualized character or anything. It just looked like a regular gamer kind of girl who is a ginger. And they said, can we put this in the game, and can she have this backstory, and can she be Vivian James? And we're like, all of this seems acceptable. I don't know why anyone would have a problem with it. And we were wrong. And within an hour,
your reaction of bafflement at the endless chasm of offense that people can take is it's adorable. You're touching my heart.
Oh, and this is what it's like. They've been through. So many of them have been through a variety of cultural studies programs, women's studies, racial studies, all of these things, all of these different studies programs that trains them to be hyper aware of anything that could possibly offend anyone at any time, right? And so, they really are professional umbrage takers. And so there really is no way to win. Once they're mad at you, and frankly, it's Matt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, frankly, your first mistake was apologizing to anybody.
Well, that's the thing. We've actually never straight up apologized. But if you except the 4chan,
the moment that you sort of step back on your back heel,
yeah,
right? You shift your weight backwards into a defensive position. That's like blood in the water to these people,
but,
right?
Yeah.
It really is. The way I have viewed my entire the way I do things is if I say something that's offensive, right, or something that somebody takes offense to, and they take offense to it, I basically tell them that they're a stupid little person for taking offense to it.
Yeah.
Get a life. Find something useful to do.
but it's been like the thing that with Vivian James, like like Tumblr sexualized her immediately, and I warned them, like, she's a multi-dimensional character and she's technically 4chan's daughter. Do not slut shame this woman. But Vice picked it up, and like Vice wrote it. And, like,
Vice. We love you in all the wrong ways.
But they wrote it up as like 4chan creating a character to agree with them. And like I literally wrote like this quote, like, people who are in serious social justice movements do not say that 4chan can't give, or sorry, V can't give money to women, because like that's an act of oppression. All you're doing is embarrassing your own social justice movement and destroying the narrative that has been created around it. It's like, if you want to destroy the narrative, support 4chan, but you're just going to make yourself look silly. And then she quoted, like, she took the first line about "you're oppressing 4chan" and like integrated it in, like, not taking the lines about "don't do this because you'll look stupid." And then like Vice's Facebook page, like, just the Facebook comments for this particular page just like emptied up with like, "you're incompetent and you've never done any research on this topic." And they had to take it down, and we wrote a post about it saying like how the sins of the father aren't the sins of the daughter, and Vice shouldn't imply them, that Vivian James doesn't follow her father's like footsteps and everything else like that. And I'm just like, Vice, you're looking like utter idiots now, and we warned you about this. Like, don't. but it's been like,
that's so funny.
Well, the thing is that they're treating this character like someone who can be violated, really.
Yeah.
But
the mere act of her creation was a violation.
Yeah.
It was appropriation.
Appropriation of something.
Because we all know that every single member of V, right, is a neck-bearded straight white male, cisgendered, and a patriarchal oppressor, right? And how dare they even, have the gall to create a female character, and a cute one at that.
Yeah.
She's adorable. I love her so much. She has such tired eyes. She's like, I just need to get past this level. It's like 3 a.m. and I do not care. It's so awesome.
Like, it's like, no matter what you do, you will be in the wrong. They have declared you an enemy. Now you're marked for life, Matt.
Yeah, but it's... Oh, again, it's been this like peculiar thing where, as I said, like, as I keep telling people, like, I'm a visitor to this world, but it's just been this thing where, again, it's like the reporter will ask, like, he'll ask these like horribly leading questions, like,
yeah,
I don't know if the fine young capitalists have raped a woman, and then I'm just like, we have a media address. No, they'll keep they'll continually project like that this character was made as a means of harassing women in the industry. That
they'll say things. They'll start to question.
No, I mean, heaven forbid that you should suggest that women get into the industry on merit.
Well, what the reporters
good coding skills and things like that,
or even do a game, right? Not if they want to make a game, they actually make a game.
Gosh,
well,
but I actually like a lot of the games on there. All the five main games that are left. I think I'm really fond of Lux and Afterlife Empire. I ended up voting for Afterlife Empire. Yeah. Oh, that was really cool. I think it's really cute. I think it has a lot of potential.
There's people like, none of the ideas seem to be good. Everybody need to be bad. Everybody seems to like at least one of them. So that's good.
One thing I want to just tell you, Matt, just in this moment that I have, is anytime a reporter says, well, but don't you think that? You know that they're going to take whatever you say and they're going to prune it word by word if they have to with ellipses in between. Maybe they'll delete the ellipses just to make it more readable and create whatever answer they want to create.
Oh no, like we've definitely understood that. It's just like, again, it's been this thing, like, because so many journalists like said so many stupid things at the beginning of the production. The number one thing journalists actually ask us is like, "Will you mention the stupid thing that I said before?" And we're like, "No." It's like, that's been a big thing. They actually are trying to cover their ass on stupid things they've said.
Yeah, well, of course, but I mean, it's absolutely like, I've been interviewed by quite a lot of people, and you can tell a hostile interview. Usually, if you're speaking verbally with them, not necessarily over email, but speaking verbally, you can tell just by the way they phrase the question.
Oh yeah, like, and I get that. Like, I've had like some media training. It's just like, even then, it's just they never give the right. They never. I always like, they expect me to get offended, and I'm like, no, that seems like a valid question. Let me answer it.
Yeah,
like that. Oh. That's.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the only way you can go, is not be shocked by their questions, not be shocked by their stupidity, not be shocked by their assumptions, not be shocked by the fact that they've already pigeonholed you as a villain, right? Yeah. And just answer the questions and hope for the best, right? Like, right. I was interviewed, I forget what website it was for, and it was a 45-minute long interview. We talked about a multitude of topics. The only time we talked about false rape accusations was when she asked me about them, right? And basically forced the conversation to go in that direction, right? And then my entire 45-minute interview with her was a half of a sentence, quote, and basically a statement that implied that was all I wanted to talk about was false rape accusations.
Yeah, that sounds like them. Yeah, like, again, that's sort of been our thing. It's just they're not even asking us the questions. They're just like, we'll make stuff up.
You know what? I just let them all know right at the start, because they'll be like, oh, and I'm going to be recording this. Is that okay? And I'm like, oh, sure, I'm recording it too.
Yeah.
Checkmate.
Well, no.
And then I upload the recording to YouTube.
No, like, I understand. Sorry, this is our big thing. It's like, as I said, like, I have television experience where, to put it, like, things that have legitimately happened to me on a television set. The producer got the PA to get EMT to slow down so they could get the last shot of the guy overdosing. I've done what's like, I basically in television, it's like so much, they're so much better at it that even when like the video game people, like we keep running into them, one tried to bribe us and I was just like, this is.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. They said if we dropped something that they had said, they would give us, like, at PAX, they would talk about us pleasantly. Like, they would push us at PAX.
What?
Yeah. And we were just like, I was just like, what, really? No. Like,
you're a great guy, man. Your integrity is fantastic. In fact, talking about that, how would you define journalistic integrity? Where do you feel on the whole Gamergate situation? I mean, you don't have to go into anything you don't want to, but I'm saying in terms of this kind of dishonesty, I mean, where do you stand on that?
Well, I think like what's just coming up is that basically the barrier to entry to make a game is much lower now because you don't have to buy dev kits and stuff. So now they're artificially creating this barrier to entry by creating an indie culture. And thus the people who like control the indie culture can be kingmakers. They can say which games get made and which games go down. And the whole Gamergate thing was like one person got caught out. And now everybody's denying that there is that sort of a culture. And what's happening is it's like slowly unraveling. And the big thing is that I don't see, like, a lot of the AAA stuff, like, I'm looking at them, and, like, that's not really where, I don't even know why they're engaging in the conversation, because it's kind of, it's like, we haven't done anything wrong, but we still blew $20 million on marketing. It's like, no. Marketing is as adjacent to evil as you can get. You've got, you've got simulated blood on your hands, but don't worry, it's fine. But at the independent scene, it was just like people who had very little seniority taking money from other people who didn't seem to have a lot of money, and then, like, not rating things or, like, just giving their friends, like, huge preferential treatment. And we knew a lot of that, like, going in. Like, part of the reason why we did it as a contest and chose the names and everything else like that was to get enough attention so that we could actually give this woman, like, enough PR that people would actually know her game. Like, it would help to get around a bit of this gatekeeper thing. But we just didn't think that it would be like, hey, someone's trying to get through the gate, let's all jump on him and punch him.
And not just punch him, but punch him with some of the most, like the accusations that got flung over that whole thing. Nobody wants to be told that they hate women. Nobody wants anybody to think that they hate women.
Yeah, but it's just been this weird sort of thing where it's like, as we keep saying to people, it's like some of these female developers or female, like, critics are, like, being elevated to the status of godhood, where if you talk about them negatively, it's like some sort of blasphemy. And it's like, no. Like, I can admit they got, like, 80% of it right, but that means that they've got 20% of it a little wrong. We should, like, point out these things. But it's just been this thing that to even do that is again, to spit on the cross or something like that. It just, we again, almost no one has criticized any particular point that we've made, especially because when we expound upon it, they look like idiots. But it's just like, you shouldn't be going against this person, or you shouldn't be hanging out with these people. And
you're bad people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're bad people, Matt. You're bad people. You got the bad people sticker on your...
And so are we. We're very, very, very bad people.
Oh yeah, but
We're
I don't
so bad.
I don't get any of that. I don't get any of that bullshit, right?
Well, you're right. No, once you actually just declare, you put your flag out there, bad. They leave you alone. They're just like, okay, we're moving along.
But But as I said, like, I wrote a post about this, and it happened a couple times. Like, somebody Skyped me, and then a couple people emailed me. But, like, some of the smaller people who are, like, doing videos and stuff are, like, getting called about it. One of them got an harassing phone call, and a couple other people have been, like, receiving threats, like actual threats. And I wrote this post, like, I don't understand this. You have a direct, like, email to me. I read every one, and you can, like, send an email to the media account, and I'll totally go on your podcast, and you can call me horrible for half an hour. Like, I'm actually, like, I booked off time from work for this, but it's like none of that is going on. It's just it's like we have to talk among it ourselves, and, like, I'll do a name search for me, and they'll be saying something in a completely wrong manner, and I'll be like, well, actually, if you go here, you can see this, and it's like, stop ruining our criticism. Like, stop using facts.
All right, one final question. What do you think? What do you hope that people come away with from this Gamergate situation? What do you think the conversation needs to be to sort of bridge that divide between this problem in gaming journalism and the gamers? What do you think we need to do to, or at least the conversation that needs to take place?
You need alternative means of funding projects, and if that's something like the Fine Young Capitalists, that's something like another group that is basically totally focused on finding good ideas and making those games so that those people can get enough like collateral, like famous collateral, that they made a game that people like, that people buy, that they don't have to deal with all of the gatekeepers. That's the only fundamental way to change the system. I don't think that setting all the journalist people on fire will get rid of the problem.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think this is really about just completely destroying those people. I think it's really, we need to hold them accountable, because people really do make those kinds of purchasing decisions based upon the things that they say, and when they violate that trust, it can be really bad.
There's in the video game world, there's no shelf space, there's no individual unit cost. Your largest factor that you can't control is just publicity. And again, they seem to be having sex with each other, which is not uncommon in the media world at all. But it's just that they're more attractive in the media world. I mean, it's been the weirdest thing that I'm like, this is amazingly incestuous. But it's that we don't want to have these kingmakers. Like, that's the whole thing. And moving to more of a community focus so we don't have kingmakers seems to be a better way of doing that. That no one person can decide what games are made and what games aren't.
Well, I think it should be a matter of the gaming public. Right?
Yeah.
The gaming public, the people who want to buy games, should be the ones who have the say over what games are made, right?
Yeah.
And this is what freaks me out about the plethora of articles from journalists in gaming that have come out over the last few days or so, basically saying, fuck your demographic, fuck your target demographic, you don't need them, they're a bunch of misogynists, right? Gaming can go on without them. Gaming can go on without the people who buy the games? Really?
No. Again,
Gaming is going to leave those assholes behind.
I think it has to do with. I think what it really has to do with overall is what's happening is that there are many different kinds of demographics. There's many different kinds of people that play games, as opposed to the way it was, say in the 80s. They're really trying to appeal with different kinds of games, and now there are these people who don't do the very hardcore, very first person shooters or the very competitive stuff, who are trying to
with
they really want to try and frame gaming. They want to change it to be the way they want, instead of appreciating that there are different kinds of games for different people. And
they don't want to have games made for those people and for themselves. They want all of the games to conform to what they want, even if they'll never play those games, right?
Well, yeah.
The very fact that those games exist and have those specific elements offends them, and those games must be wiped from the face of the earth.
Yeah, there is room for the people that like their Bejeweled and their Facebook games and their their first person shooters and their role playing games, their high fantasy role playing games. There's room for all those people. We just have to not let one side rule the discussion about all the others.
Nope.
Okay.
And I think that we probably we're hitting the wire in terms of time.
Yeah, I guess we gotta.
So we gotta thank everyone. We gotta thank Sage, who had to pop out, so he's not here to receive his thanks. Yeah. But we'll send them telepathically, and he'll receive them through his gingerness, I guess.
Yeah, through the billions of antennae that are his hair.
Yeah. And thanks, Mike, for coming on. You got quiet there. I guess you were just contemplating all the wisdom that was flowing from the various...
I think he's drinking, actually.
Yeah, okay.
You're both right.
Okay. And thanks, always, Rachel. Rachel, you hosted it, but I guess I'm going to be ending it. You began it, but I ended it. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen, for, stopping that thing they call what is it, mothering? That little side project you have on there.
Yeah. I just put a ball gag on him finally and stuffed him in a closet. I'm gonna let him out in a couple hours.
Yeah. It sounds totally kosher to me. And thanks, Matt.
Oh god.
Thanks for coming on with us and for telling us your story. Hopefully we weren't too harsh on you.
It's cool, and I guess we should wrap it up. So thanks for letting me be here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do stay after the show for a moment. I have something to say.
Okay.
Nothing bad.
Okay, so we don't have Crystal on today, so there's nobody's to say Carl.
Doctor Who sucks.
No, you suck.
Staffers really loves you.
Crystal. It has to be Crystal.
Staffers really love you.
Who the hell wrote this crap?